Welcome to the Organic Wine Podcast. Hello and welcome. I'm Adam Huss, coming to you from Los Angeles. Thanks for listening. It is my huge pleasure to have Steve Matthiasson as my guest for this episode. And what I have recorded for you today is a comprehensive instructional on how to farm grapes organically. Steve uses his over 25 years of experience to take us through an entire year of farming a vineyard. This episode is not so much an interview as a masterclass. If you haven't heard of Steve Matthiasson or his winery, Matthiasson Wines, let me give you a quick intro. Steve is a 6-time James Beard Award Nominee for his winemaking. He has been named Winemaker of the Year twice by 2 different publications. Steve literally wrote the manual on sustainable wine growing in California. And Steve is a farmer first. He built a wine business in Napa as a punk rock farmer outsider who makes Napa Cab that is 13% alcohol and skin fermented Ribolla Gialla. His accolades as a winemaker belie the fact that his wines simply capture the enormous amount of time and attention and care that he gives to the vineyards he farms. I say all this because in this episode, Steve spends very little time talking about himself and his winery. We jump right into the farming, and he gives a comprehensive instructional in viticulture without leaving any time to promote himself. A huge thanks to Steve for graciously laying out his knowledge so selflessly. And I want to warn you, we go deep, so if you aren't that interested in the real detailed how-to of farming grapes, you may be a bit overwhelmed. But if you have any interest in learning the hows, whens, and whats of wine growing, this is an amazing and invaluable episode. Get out some paper. You will want to take notes. And if you want to learn more about this amazing guy and his organic approach to wine, please check out his other great interviews on podcasts such as I'll Drink to That with Levi Dalton or The Grape Nation. Steve's knowledge about and passion for wine is as immense as his generosity of spirit, and your life will only be improved by knowing him and his wines better. Enjoy. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate this. It's a big pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, it's an honor, and I'm just really glad that you're focusing in on organic farming and everything around that within the wine industry.
Yeah, and I know that for you is where it all begins, and that's where I'd kind of like to begin just talking is what are the, for you, here's my first question for you. What are the principles that sort of guide your approach to viticulture? Or maybe another way of asking it is like, what is the science that informs your perspective on viticulture, both, on a vineyard level or even on a global level?
Okay. So the science and the principles, I guess, for my approach to viticulture, first off, I love science and there's so much science. I've really studied for decades, the sort of agricultural science and the history and heritage of agricultural science. The um, There's so many, because an interesting thing about agricultural science is that there's so many different fields that are entwined because it's an applied science, right? So so you name it. I mean, like soil science is a subset of agricultural science, right? And within soil science, if you like at a university, like it's soil microbiology, soil physics is like a subset of soil science. There's so it's endlessly fascinating because there's so many different rabbit holes, and you can just spend an entire lifetime delving into them and then integrating what you learn there into your understanding of what's happening out in the vineyard. But so like a lot of what informs me is the science of ecology, and so ecology is basically study of the interactions and energy flow among organisms in a complex system, and that's really how I look at the vineyard. So what kind of geeks me out is how can we use this land in a way that we can produce wonderful wines with without external inputs and in such a way that the land restores and enhances natural habitat. Um, in doing so in a way that people can not hurt themselves while doing the work and can prosper. I guess that's how I would kind of lump it all together. And so that so that makes it. There's there's just it's just a fascinating challenge. That also feels good because it feels like it's a worthwhile challenge too. It's not just doing a crossword puzzle. It's like a crossword puzzle for good, and so that makes it really interesting. So
Yeah,
that's kind of how I approach it.
nice. Yeah, I'm curious. You said like not hurt yourself, and I definitely think about that too. I mean, that's one of the things that I actually say on our website is just, we want to provide I mean, organic farming provides a safe space for both, for everybody that lives in and around the vineyards or works in and around the vineyards, the animals, the human animals. Um, I'm curious, have you encountered situations, because I know you've worked with people who have worked in conventional for years, and have you encountered, have you seen anecdotally or otherwise with data people who it's pretty clear probably got sick, got cancer from the stuff that they were spraying, non-organic
Um,
obviously.
yeah, I mean, in terms of my personal experience of people I've known, I mean, the problem is it's totally anecdotal because I know plenty of
Yeah,
farm workers that got cancer and died at a young age, and plenty of farmers that got cancer and died at a young age. But on the
right,
other hand, I've also, my entire adult life has been in agriculture, so I don't have a comparison with non people in this
got
industry
it.
to see if it's more or less. It seems like a
Yeah,
lot, but we know, like some of these things are just, we just know that they are carcinogens. I mean, some of them you hypothesize, or you like, as an organic farmer, you go, that shit'll cause cancer, right? But, I
right,
worked in pest management. I was a licensed pest control advisor for 25 years. And so I had to get my continuing education, there's continuing education hours. There's just a lot of exposure to the science that I've had. And a lot of the chemicals actually are known carcinogens. Like
right,
diethane is a commonly was, people don't use it that much anymore, but it was really common when I got into it. Zyram, Captan, benlate. I mean, those are known carcinogens, and a lot of them are illegal now because of that. But they were, it's not, 15 years ago, not that long ago, they were still being used. So they're known carcinogens. So then when they now, like the newer science on like glyphosate and stuff is not as clear cut, it's probably a carcinogen or probably causes other issues like Parkinson's and things like that. But there's chemicals like benlate that it's not probably, there is data it causes cancer. So it's like,
right.
why would you use that shit if it
Yeah,
causes cancer? I mean, it's crazy to me. Or
yeah,
it causes, like some of the insecticides like lorazepam that cause neurological problems. It's a known fact. So like some of the, initially when they first started restricting lorazepam, it was on fruits and vegetables that kids would tend to eat more because kids are more sensitive than adults because they're developing. So it's, like, or the endocrine disruptors, like, we know for a fact DDT is an endocrine disruptor. That's why it's illegal.
right.
This is like based in science. And so then I look at the chemicals that don't have studies associated with them. And I go, well, why would I, just because they haven't looked at it doesn't mean it's not
Right.
carcinogenic. And it's just then it just becomes an abundance of caution. Like, let's not use this shit if we can, we don't need it.
Yeah, why roll the dice with your life and everyone else's? It does
Yeah,
seem crazy to
exactly.
me.
But then there's
Uh,
other aspects too of just like ergonomics, like how are people being asked to work, like,
yeah.
and there's like, workplace harassment and that sort of thing. And so all of those things are something that, we're trying to improve upon in our workplace.
Oh, that's great. And I mean, and there is now a certification that takes that to the next level, the regenerative organic certification.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you're a pretty big adopter and and supporter of the
Yeah,
new.
we definitely are, and and we're actually looking into labor certification, the Equitable Farming Initiative, EFI.
Oh, cool. Oh,
They're
wow.
more for like big farms, and so we're just having in early conversations with them about maybe they can tailor what they offer to like smaller operations, because we don't really have a good labor certification here in the U.S. for smaller operations, like kind of like equivalent of fair trade or something like that, because there's no
Right.
because fair trade doesn't operate in the U.S.
Right. I thought
And
that that's
so
how. I thought that's what regenerative organic was using, was the fair trade principles, or the fair trade, even regulatory body to to certify the labor aspect, the social
oh, I
aspect.
didn't. I was not aware of that. And so
Yeah, I think they
I'm
are
gonna look
actually.
into that. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, check that out. Yeah. Um, so here's a question for you. What if somebody, because this is, obviously like a goal of mine would be to encourage people to transition from conventional to organic or regenerative organic, ideally. What advice do you have for somebody switching, like, somebody who's, let's say they have a family farm that's been farmed conventionally, they're maybe second generation, and it's 40 years been conventional. Like what what should they be aware of if they're gonna take that step and make the transition?
Um, well, I think like I've worked with a lot of people have transitioned from conventional to organic,
Yeah.
and generally, um, there's really two ways to do it, right? You can pull off the band-aid and just go
Right.
for it and deal with the learning curve and the hiccups, and I think that that's a good strategy. If you for just It's probably the better strategy is just freaking pull off the band-aid. um, but then a lot of people are like, well, we want to just um, ease into it, and so the easy into it, you can either take like one section, one block of vines, or and start doing that organically and see how that goes. A lot of people do that, and a lot of people do, and I think there's an advantage there because you're not betting the whole farm, but you're sort of pulling the band-aid off, so you get to really go for it, but on a piece of your farm, so that you can you know deal with the learning curve without betting the whole farm.
Is there any
I Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh no, go
I was
ahead.
just gonna ask, uh, so if you, let's say you were doing that, I was actually considering leasing a part of a vineyard this year to do that. It didn't work out, but one of my concerns was, let's say two-thirds of the vineyard is farmed conventionally, and then I'm farming the other third
Hmm.
organically. Is there any concern that the pests in the two-thirds is going to leap over to my third? You know, just because of the
Oh,
proximity
interesting.
and the.
I thought you were going to say, is there any concern about the pesticide drift?
No, no,
And
yeah,
yeah, because on the pesticide drift, I don't worry about that because I'm not into I don't think the idea of purity is
right, yeah,
attainable anymore, and so it's just about what are you doing. But on the pest side, it's interesting. Like I had these. So when I was working in Lodi for the Wine Grape Commission, when we had our sustainability program in 1999, we had two of the grower members. We would monitor these vineyards and count the bugs weekly and stuff when we were trying to ascertain whether the sustainability practices were working, and get some data there so that it wasn't so that we could advance the whole dialogue. And so we had these test vineyards we would monitor, and these two were right next to each other. One guy was like way into his chemicals, and the other guy next to him was like a total hippie. He was like his place was just completely unkempt and wild.
yeah.
And a lot of German farmers in Lodi for sure, and you get like the stereotype of like, and as I'm half German, I can say the stereotype is true of like the German orderly, neat, tidy, and so
Anal,
and anal, all that good stuff. And
yeah.
so yeah, Freud, right? But he was Austrian, same difference basically. And so the the German guy was always complaining because right there on the edge of his field, next to the organic field, he would just get hammered by leaf hoppers. and they didn't talk to each other because they hated each other. But I would
Mm,
check both vineyards. On the organic field, he would get hammered by leafhoppers over on the edge where the also. So for some reason,
right.
the leafhoppers were really bad on that edge between the sprayed field and the unsprayed field. So ecologically, I
Huh.
have no idea why that was the case, but it was pretty funny and ironic that they were both blaming it on the other person in a way they just lived on the edge between the two fields. But
That's
but in general, I think that I would not be worried that the pests are going to go over from the organic side. It's I mean from the sprayed side, it's not like they're going to drive the pests because insects are kind of like not really that savvy to be like, oh, they're spraying over here, spraying, so I'm going to go over there where they're not spraying. Insects are kind of like little mini algorithms the way they think with like little if then statements. So there's like, I'm going to fly randomly in 360 degrees inland and test where I'm at. And if it's not good, I'm going to fly 360 degrees again and land and test where I'm at. That'd be like one way of insects moving. And then over time, they tend to be where they like it because they've tested enough times, even though it was random which direction they flew.
right.
Or like some of them will have like they have like visual cues or they fly towards, but they're not. It's not like oh this area here is safer or anything like that. They and so thank God because otherwise we have major problems. And so they kind of so they're spraying over there. Like I don't think it's really I don't see it affecting you over here. Each of our little areas kind of exist in there. Not that they aren't connected because everything is fades into the next space, but um, relatively independent, I think.
Yeah. Well, what I mean, I've heard things like if you are transitioning, it might be a good idea to just give the vineyard or farmland like a year of just rest. Do you buy into that? Do you think that's a good idea?
A
Like
rest in
rest
terms
is in
of
no spray of anything. Like just stop everything and let it be what it is. I think this is
no,
specifically about a vineyard, not
I haven't heard that, but I would not buy into that
okay.
because especially on the disease side, because you don't want stuff to build up.
Right, right,
So like the last thing I would want to do is allow powdery mildew or botrytis or to build up in the vineyard and then have to deal with that organically. One of the principles of integrated pest management, which is like kind of like there's a whole sort of of construct around the idea of integrated pest management of how to like manage pests. And
right,
it's really important for organic farming to like use IPM or integrated pest management principles. And they kind of have a hierarchy of of from least impact to most impact that you follow. So like you start with cultural controls, right? Like if you can control mites by um, driving slower on the roads and not raising dust, that's like a no brainer, and that you would do that would be the first thing for a mite problem, for example, spider mites. And so you have this hierarchy, and one of the hierarchies in integrated pest management is sanitation. So like if, for example, if you have a bunch of botrytis, and so you didn't pick those bunches of grapes um, because they were fuzzy and diseased when you're harvesting. In the winter, you would want to
right.
get those bunches, cut them off, and put them on the ground and stomp them down into the cover crop so that they rot, so that the spores aren't. So it's like sanitation is like this, like because every crop that's part of the deal, right? Like in peaches, you cut all the mummies down. They call them mummies, the old diseased peaches, and you
Yeah.
get them out of there. So or like in almonds, right? I used to work in, like the worms live in the overwintering nuts. So in the winter, you knock off all the overwintering nuts. So sanitation is a really big deal, and with organic farming, it's more important. And so you never want to let stuff build up.
Now, is knocking it to the ground enough? I mean, because wouldn't that? just keep it in the vineyard? Do you need to
Well,
remove
it
it from the
depends
vineyard?
on the disease, and botrytis I don't actually know the answer to. But like powdery
Okay.
mildew is epiphytic, meaning it lives up on the plant,
The trunk.
and
Yeah.
it can't compete. Like soil fungi will just immediately pounce on any powdery mildew and kill it.
Oh, okay.
Because it's dog eat dog down in the soil. It's a lot easier to live up on a leaf.
Yeah, yeah. And
And so generally they tried, it's like some fungi like brown rot in peaches, you have to get it out of there. It's not enough to put it in the soil. So it's really like organism by organism. I don't know the answer for botrytis. I tried to use botrytis as an example, but as I was like thinking, it's not the greatest example because we don't, in our climate, California, we don't tend to worry about that as much. It's more of a problem in rainier areas.
right.
So I don't actually know if botrytis will get eaten up by soil fungi or not.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, we'll look into that. I w- I powdery lives like it overwinters like in the trunk of the vine, right? So and it's an early season generation thing, which is why the early spraying in organics is important. Is that
Yeah.
am I getting that right? That's a big
Hmm.
part of it. Um since we're getting technical, do you I would I would love to just hear what your year is like in a vineyard. Like what, month by month or action by action, what you take what you do in a vineyard.
Okay. Well, we're pruning right now,
Yeah.
and obviously pruning is really
February
important.
1st. Wait, it's February 2nd. All right.
Yeah, we start pruning right when we get back from the holidays, basically. And so pruning is wine quality, and also big part of organics as well, because because you try to part of, so that when I talk about cultural controls for diseases, like not driving fast and making a bunch of dust, getting like light, airflow through your canopy is a cultural control, so you have less disease pressure. So we want to make sure our pruning is good and the spurs are all spaced out, etc. And vine balance is really a big deal. So more vigorous vines are more susceptible to disease than less vigorous vines, just due to the nature of the rapid growth is just more tender and so easier for the
Mhm.
fungi to infect. So we want balanced vines, really important. And so like at pruning, we can decide, oh, this vine's really vigorous. We're going to leave more buds on it so that we can so the vigor per shoot is reduced.
Okay.
And then like conversely, this is a weaker vine. Rather than put a bunch of nitrogen fertilizer on it and try to force it into being a strong vine, which um, you know we kind of figure that we're working on our soil health, and over time the vines get what they need, and we can add extra because we do our compost by hand. So skipping ahead to the end of the year, so a weak vine's going to get extra compost, and it might get a
Right.
little bit of organic fertilizer. And so, but in the short term, we need to make it smaller so that the shoots grow enough so that they can carry a crop. And so, pruning wise, the big vines, the strong vines get bigger, and our our weak vines get smaller. So every single vine is pruned differently, basically. Um, and so that's what's kind of going on with pruning. And then we're treating
Can you
our pruning
prune?
wounds.
Is it possible? Can I ask you? I
Yeah.
know stylistically, can you prune to a style of wine? I mean, I guess that all depends on where your vines
Not
are.
really.
Okay.
I think that vine balance kind of is what it is, and your
Okay.
best shot at making the any kind of wine but the best shot at it being good is for the vine to be balanced.
Yeah.
So our for like Matthiasson, we pick really early, and our wines are known for being like very bright and very light on their feet. And then most of my consulting clients pick late and make much bigger wines.
Right.
We have like this year, I got 7 of my clients got 100 points with Coloni, and so it's like everyone was super happy about that. We don't for Matthiasson, we don't even submit for scores, but I sure as hell know they're not going to get 100 points, and so it's a different style. We prune exactly the same, basically.
Right. Got it. Okay. All right.
Because they're going
So
for, you're not going to get 100 points if you don't have a balanced vine, and you're not going to be able to pick like we do, because I think we have full ripeness of our tannins and full depth of flavor at low alcohols, and that's part to a large part because the vines are really balanced.
got it. Now, go ahead. Sorry. Okay. So pruning has happened. Do you have a
Yeah, and we
break
have to
on
treat our
pruning?
pruning wounds because for trunk diseases. And
Do you
luckily, it
actually
used to be that
do you actually
organically there was nothing. We would put manure on the wounds, but now we have a couple really good products: Vitaseal and
yeah.
Biocam.
What was that first one?
Vitaseal.
Viticeal, yeah. I've seen that. So you actually go around and paint this, like dip the little sponge thing into the bucket and then tap the cut,
Tap
the
every
wound.
little cut, yeah. And the reason, so that way the cut's protected from the fungal spores that land on there and then start infect and slowly kill the vine from the inside out. And so the
Yeah.
Vitaseal is basically, I actually help them come to market.
Oh
So
wow.
the nice thing is that we have a lifetime supply free was how they compensated
That
me.
is
But
nice.
I really wanted to like help them be successful because when it came out, it was the only organic um, wound
Yeah.
protectant, and it's so that it's just basically a paint with the active ingredient as a derivative of cinnamon oil,
Huh. That's
and
amazing.
so we use that. But the problem is if it's like if the vines are bleeding, which then because I don't know how an audience wise I'm going to try to break some of this stuff down a little bit. So like when later in the season the vines start bleeding, which is the water starts running out of your pruning cuts, and
Right.
so if you then obviously you can't paint anything on there, it just washes off, and that's where now the new product of Biocam comes in because that's a competitive fungi made from trichoderma, which is this fungi that for decades people have been trying to figure out how to use as a biological control agent because it's a fungi that eats other fungi. Totally safe fungi that just
Right.
it lives on other fungi, and so that one, so this year we've moved to that for when the vines are bleeding because it'll just kind of grow in there and stay.
That's awesome. I mean, that's kind of the idea. I've heard that's the kind of the idea of putting manure on too, right? Like you have the microbes, the microbiology in that compost competing against the pathogenic fungi. Is that the
Yeah,
idea there?
exactly.
Sort of a
It,
homeopathic
so you're
version
just
of it.
kind of hoping that there's enough stuff growing in there that'll out compete.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I actually practice spraying. I mean, not that not that I have any data to say that it's working yet, but I've just been doing some compost tea spraying on our vines since fall. I mean, we have a little front yard Los Angeles vineyard, but I think if we can beat powdery mildew here, I think we could beat it anywhere. We're like in the marine layer most of the year with perfect growing conditions for powdery mildew. It's ridiculous. Like 8 months out of the year is optimal for powdery here.
Oh
But we'll
man.
see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Well, I mean, I've never thought about spraying compost tea dormant on the bark and seeing if you could get rid of the canidia. That's very interesting. I think on that one.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure it depends on the compost tea too, and what's in it, and you know, so there's a little bit of luck, and I'm going to try doing it at different times of the year. Hopefully, get different microbiology at different times. Maybe do different composts and see what happens. But trying to see, what will happen. Um, I
Yeah.
don't know. I'll keep you posted, but I don't know how well it would work on a large scale. But we'll see if it works at
We
all.
just You just got my head spinning because I'm thinking about this biotam, the trichoderma fungi, and kind of going, huh? Because we're actually saving on labor a little bit and spraying it over the vines instead of painting each cut right now.
Oh yeah,
And so
yeah,
you spend more money on the material but less on labor, and we're short on labor right now because one of our key people we got turned away at the border, um,
Uh,
and which was a total bummer. And so I'm going, I wonder if that, because the powdery mildew overwinters in the bark, I wonder if any of the
yeah,
trichoderma would eat the powdery mildew that's overwintering in the bark. So I need to email some of the people at Davis.
fun. All right. I hope you let everyone know what you find out. That'd be great.
Yeah.
All right. So then we treated the wounds. It's kind of waiting now for bud break to happen, right? Or what are
Yeah.
you doing other things? Are you doing any composting, early season
No, when we're
composting?
waiting for, no, we don't do really usually early season compost. So once we treat the wounds, we wait for bud break. We move into and bottle in the winery while we're waiting for bud break.
Okay.
And try to keep everybody fully employed. So we kind of schedule our bottlings for slow times in the vineyard. That lets us bottle our wine when we want to because we have multiple slow times. So like some wines we want to bottle earlier because we want to keep them more freshness, lighter aromatic wines like Pinot Meunier, and some wines we'll bottle a little bit later. It gets a little bit more development. Some wines we wait till the right before harvest to bottle. So it's all wine dependent. So if we have these little slots, we go that we kind of know we're going to be slow in the vineyard, and that's a bottling slot depending on
Right.
on the wines. Yeah, so then after we bottle, we'll move back out to the and shoot thin. And shoot thinning's kind of a big deal because so like the vine, the tunt grows from all over like a just like a chia pet, and we want to just leave the shoots on the spurs or canes that we left at pruning time.
And
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 the
I'm
way.
is
Mhm.
part of the necessity of shoot thinning because you've, for insurance sake, left like two buds for each spur, and you kind of want to get that down to one shoot per spur? Is that part of it as well?
Yeah, one shoot per bud. So like on the two bud spur, it'll get two shoots.
Right.
Unless it's
But
a
and you
very
want
weak spur, then it gets one.
got it. And you want to keep both of those.
Both of them, yeah.
Okay. All right. Got it. All right. So you're thinning the other things that might have just popped out from like who knows where on the vine.
Yeah, exactly. And so it goes all up in the trunk, the cordons, everything, and so we thin all that stuff off, and that's all growing in the spring based on stored carbohydrates. So because the plant inside the trunk of the vine is like a potato, right? So it's starchy. There's starch in there, and that's how they store their energy over the winter. And
Right.
so they grow the shoots up, and the shoots have to get about 6 inches long before they're photosynthesizing enough to propel their own growth, maybe even a foot long. So
Oh wow.
somewhere in
Okay.
there, and so up until then, it's all stored energy from within that vine. And so like a stronger vine has more stored energy, and a weaker vine has less stored energy. Part of the what by definition, and
Right.
so
Right.
the stronger vines push out more strongly in the spring. And so part of our striving for vine balance is then we go through and we shoot thin all of the weak vines first. So it's a little bit extra work to find all the weak vines, weak vineyards, weak sections, and shoot them all first, so that all the stored energy is directed into the shoots we're going to keep, and we're not wasting energy in shoots that we're going to thin off.
Got it.
And then we go through and we thin all of our strong vines. I shoot thin our strong vines, and then we have the ones that are too strong we save for the very end and we thin those
Got it. And have
last.
you and this is how long are the shoots at this point? Are they
Well,
just
on the wheat vines they're about 5 inches.
okay?
The regular vines they're about probably 10 or 12 inches, and then we'll wait for the strong vines to get up to like 18 inches so that we get rid of a bunch of the energy and steal it basically away from the vines and try to you know um, deplete their stored carbohydrates, their stored starch reserves, so that
Now,
so you can break it out of that cycle of being overly vigorous. Overly vigorous vines get disease. They ruin your wine. That like the wine from overly vigorous vines is herbal, bell pepper, harsh tannins, cranberry flavors, thin, no color. So so it's like a major negative, and so we're always trying to manage the overly strong vines and get them down into being balanced.
Got
Just
it.
like the weak vines are a problem because the weak vines for wine quality, besides weak vines being like poor producing, so economically it's a problem, but they're also um, bitter tannins, not fruity, thin, hollow wines, low color
Oh,
also because they don't have the energy to ripen the fruit. And their immune
got it.
system is overexpressed, and so they get really bitter.
Huh. That is very cool. Now, at this point, I'm I'm guessing you've done a first spray of something, right?
So for spraying, we watch the weather. Back to integrated pest management because
Uh,
the environment is really important because we're not going to spray if it's not the right conditions. You mentioned how like in LA, like you have optimum mildew conditions. So mildew has a temperature range that it likes. So if it's too cold, we don't worry about it. We watch the weather really closely and don't start spraying when it warms up.
right.
And then generally we kind of well, remember you grew up in Gettysburg. The saying, the
Yep.
Battle of Gettysburg, was "Don't shoot till you see the whites of their eyes."
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's kind of like that. We wait and wait and wait and wait and try to save as many sprays as possible until it's right then time. We go, okay, it's time. We got to spray, and then we spray something a cleanup so that we can get rid of any mildew that kind of got started ahead of us. So we use oil to start with
So,
because oil is a really good organic spray to like smother all of the mildew and kill it.
and that's the stylet oil, I'm guessing, or
Yeah,
some version of that. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Great. And then I'm guessing throughout the season after shoot thinning, uh, you're going to be spraying again only as needed. Do you? I mean, I'm guessing in Napa you have pretty consistent weather most years that you almost could be on a schedule. Is that true with like
yeah,
sulfur or other sprays?
yeah, exactly. So we'll spray it with oil, and then maybe we'll spray it a second time with oil, and then you have to give it again, it's being weather dependent. So it might be just 10 days later, it might be 3 weeks later, depending on what the spring's like. And then
Right.
we try to time that first oil spray also, if we can, to right after the shoot thinning. So you get
Right.
all the leaves out of the way, you get really nice coverage because with oil you have to evenly coat everything, which is not easy. So with
Right.
organics, you have to be a lot better of an equipment operator than with conventional because the systemics, which is the conventional stuff, is systemic, meaning that it gets into the plant and moves around, and so you don't have to have perfect coverage. So with organic farming, you have to be a better tractor driver because you have to set your sprayer up just right and evenly coat both sides of every single leaf. There's
Right.
no room for error. And so we have to take that very seriously. We have to, that's one of the fun things about organic farming is it makes you a better farmer, you know?
Yeah.
And so we put our sprays on, we try to get our coverage after the shoot thinning, watch the weather. And then when the conditions are right, we do another oil spray. And then we feel like, okay, we don't want to put any more oil because oil is a little hard on the leaves. It kind of clogs their stomata, the little pores they use to breathe. And you'd rather not put too much oil on. So after our second spray, we are going to move to sulfur, which is a lot easier on the plants.
Right.
It's not great on the plants, but better.
Right.
And so then you have to give it a little pause because at least 12 days because oil and sulfur together will make a reaction that burns the leaves. So you have to
Right.
all the oil evaporates and when it's all gone after about 12 days, you figure it's all gone and then we can get started with sulfur. And so we put 2 or 3 sulfurs on usually, and then um, if it's low mildew pressure, like we take a lot of chances. I don't mind some powdered mildew, and I think it's actually complexity in the wine. I just want to
Uh-huh.
keep it at a dull roar. And so I don't like putting stuff on the grapes that's going to get into the wine, even if it's organic. And
Right.
so we stop probably a month or 6 weeks earlier than most people stop with our sprays.
Wow.
So if we're nice and clean, you know, um, let's call it seed hardening is this phase that's halfway between bloom and veraison, where the seeds
Uh-huh.
have finished developing. That's a when usually when that so I open the berries up and and look at the seeds and inspect the seeds, and when they're not soft anymore, they're hard and scratchy. If we're in reasonably clean on mildew, I'll stop spraying, because usually with seed hardening it also means that the skin of the grape is fully developed and it's a lot more resistant to um, mildew.
Got
And
it.
so right around that's usually when we'll stop, or so for the last spring of the year, since I don't want to get a bunch of sulfur into our wine, we'll shift over to one of there's some the biological materials like Serenade or Sonata, which are just competitive. There's this bacteria basically that I'm not worried about the residue. That it'll all be gone way before harvest.
Right. And then is I know a lot of people. I mean, I've heard the rule of just no spraying after veraison. Is that
Well, we
true
don't
for
we don't spray. Yeah. So when seed hardening is like
way before
generally
veraison?
about 5 weeks before veraison.
Okay.
So for us, we would not be spraying after anything after veraison. But for a lot of the reason people tend not to spray, to say no spraying after veraison is because after veraison, the grapes are immune to powdery mildew because the sugar content, the powdery mildew can't live. It's like the powdery mildew is a very delicate fungi, and in that high sugar, it's basically the changes the osmotic potential, which for the non-chemistry nerds, you have more solutes outside than inside
Right.
on a membrane, and so it draws moisture to from lower concentration to higher concentration, so it ruptures the cell walls of the powdery mildew.
Got it.
So
So that so
yeah, the
that
phytus
last
doesn't
spray
mind it;
that
it eats the sugar, but mildew can't handle it.
so you that last spray of Serenade or Sonata or some biological is that at seed hardening, and then that's pretty much it.
For us,
You're
yeah.
riding it out, right? I know a lot of
Right
people
now,
don't
like
do that.
the one caveat would be that you get a warm rain on your fruit before harvest, and then I might run out and put some Serenade on it, which is that again a biological to prevent detritus.
And then, are you doing anything else in the vineyard during that growing season? Are
Okay,
you
so we just kind
leaf
of skipped ahead on
pulling or
spraying. Yeah, we skipped ahead on spraying. So when we finish our shoot thinning, meanwhile we're doing all around that. While we're shoot thinning, we're also the tractors are running every single all day, every day. We're cultivating weeds underneath the vines.
okay?
All of
Why
our
do you do
vineyards are.
that?
We do that. So there's this the middle part of the vineyards. All the avenues are no till. So our vineyards, every single one of our vineyards is no till. But
Right.
under the vines, we if you leave the weeds up around the vines, um, there's two things. One is vine balance, and so it's really asking a lot of the vines to grow in grass that's the one that eat right up against their trunks, just because they're competing with the grasses for water and nutrients, and it really, really weakens the vine.
Okay.
So that could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on
How
the
vigorous your
balance of the
vines are.
vine. Yeah,
Right.
but most of our vines can't handle that much competition.
Okay.
Um, New vineyards that we're planting, we're using stronger rootstocks, and I'm trying to plan for global warming and more regenerative practices, and hopefully we will be able to, the vines will be able to handle like the grasses right up to them. But the I have to deal with mostly existing vineyards that were planted back when people used to cultivate and fertilize and water and everything. And
Right.
unfortunately, the vines need a little bit of help, so we keep the weeds away from the trunks. Also, there's the issue of voles, which are like the meadow mice, and they
Yeah.
can they can just completely wreak havoc if they have a covered, safe place to chew the bark of
Right.
the vines.
Right. Right next to the vine. Yeah. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we in the spring, we in the spring we do all our under the vine cultivation. because we're not using Roundup, and then
Right.
and we're mowing the cover crops in the middles and for frost and while we're shoot thinning, and then we move from shoot thinning into wire moving because it's very important for wine quality. The shoots are all evenly spaced from each other. If you have a big pile of shoots in one spot, that creates a lot of shading, and that changes the physiology of that portion of the vine. You get more herbal characters, and you get less ripeness in the tannins and less color. And so we put a lot of emphasis on positioning the shoots perfectly upright and within the wires as they grow.
Got it.
So that because again we're picking early, so we're picking our fruit like a month to 6 weeks before most people are picking their fruit.
Wow.
And most people are, one of the reasons that they're waiting a long time to pick their fruit is they're waiting for all of the underripe characters to go away. And with where so my focus is how do we grow the vines so that they don't make the underripe characters in the first place, and so we can pick nice and early and have fully ripe fruit that has vibrant acidity and lower alcohol, but has really nice, lush, ripe tannins and lots of flavor, and no negatives. And so getting those shoots nice and even and evenly spaced and upright is a big deal. And so we put a lot of emphasis on that. And then when the shoots get a little taller, and again, you want the shoots to all be even with each other because the stronger shoot is the negative and the weaker shoot is the negative. You're looking for a medium-sized shoot. So when the strong shoots get past the top wire, we go through and clip off the tips of all of them to stunt them so they kind of stop growing, and then they give the shorter shoots a chance to catch up so that the shoots are nice and even. So you end up with all nice even shoots in a nice line, all nicely evenly spaced from each other.
Now, when you do the hedging like that, doesn't that lead to laterals, and is that a bad thing?
Not if you just get the tip. So
Okay.
I differentiate between tipping and topping.
Got it. Okay.
Tipping is just taking off the top like a couple inches, and then if the vine wants to keep growing, it will typically resprout from the top. If you top it, which is basically taking off, like let's say the top foot or more, that's a much bigger cut, and now the laterals all up and down that shoot will tend to push.
Got it.
And so sometimes we do that on purpose when we want the laterals to push to shade the fruit if we have a really hot sunny spot.
Okay.
But generally we don't, and so we're not topping, we're tipping. And so I'm just tipping like the tallest third or so of the shoots so that the other 2/3 can catch up.
So you really have to
Meanwhile, the soil moisture every single day is becoming less and less and less as the summer goes on.
right.
And so growth is becoming less and less. And so hopefully we tip our shoots, the other ones catch up, and then everything just kind of goes to a stop and we're done. Otherwise, we might need to tip again.
Right.
And then if it's still growing, we have overly vigorous vines. Now we need to top them and just start basically treating them like a bonsai and just cutting them back over and over again, and never let them get the benefit of those leaves they made, so that again you're trying to suppress an overly vigorous situation.
Right.
But hopefully that's not a normal management practice. That's like mitigating out of balance vines.
That's like essentially me. I have Syrah growing in heavy clay, so it's nuts. Like I can't stop them growing. I dry farm them, on 12 inches of winter rain, and they grow like monsters. It's insane.
Wow. Do you give them any fertilizer or compost?
Well, so that's a question I was going to ask you. Is like, let's say somebody is in a situation like that where they have a vigorous vine in a heavy soil, but it's a nitrogen poor soil. I know in the winemaking, especially with Syrah, you want a good bit of yeast available nitrogen in the grapes, I imagine, so you avoid sort of the reductive qualities that Syrah can tend towards. But if you're adding a nitrogen rich compost into a vigorous a heavy clay soil with a vigorous vine,
Mhm.
you end up with even more vigor. Is there
Yeah,
a is there any way to get around that problem?
yeah, there is. It just doesn't work to fertilize to increase yan,
I see.
unfortunately. So yeah, yan use available nitrogen in the must. Pretty much as a rule, the great vineyards have low yan.
Oh, okay.
And so it's just a problem is that almost always like what's considered a good yan by for fermentation is almost always unfortunately an overly vigorous vineyard, and so it's just a kind of a weird
Right.
conundrum basically. But so um, so we just to put it in perspective, we farm 45 acres and we probably apply compost each year to six or so of the 45 acres.
Oh,
I consider compost to be like a healing thing. To me, it's like
huh.
chicken soup for the vineyard. And so
Yeah.
you put it on when the vineyard has a problem, but it's not an annual thing because once everything's working right, then we don't it doesn't need it basically. And
Right.
we try to keep our vineyards on the lean side nitrogen wise. So if you ever send like petiole samples, into the lab for like testing your nitrogen status, like I'd like, we want to see, I usually I'm happy if the nitrogen is like 0.85, let's say, and nitrates
Uh-huh.
are hopefully below 100. So we'd like to see all the other nutrients. Well, the acidity potassium kind of right in the sweet spot, and everything else you'd love to see it high, and the nitrogen you'd like to see on the lower side, and that's not when I say the other nutrients high, not because you've been fertilizing them, but because the soil's working and all that good
Right.
soil microbiome is producing all the phosphorus and micronutrients that for the plant. The plant's symbiotic relationships with all the fungi and everything is getting what it needs. But you'd like to see nitrogen low from a wine quality standpoint, because it's so much better tannin quality and color and and just depth of the wine with when lower nitrogen levels. And
S-
so the like if with in the fermentation, luckily there's some organic um, nutrients. So like we use this stuff called Firm Control Bio, which
Okay.
is
Yeah,
it's
I know.
certified organic out of the EU, and it's just they grow. It's basically they grow it's yeast on organic, um, I think beet sugar, but it's an organic substrate, and then you basically it's like ground up. You know, you're not adding any yeast because it's all dead and ground up, but it's a really
Right.
good certified organic yeast nutrient for when you're low yan.
Yeah, I know of like Fermento as another one.
Fermento is a good one too, but I think the Ferm Control Bio works better.
Okay. Cool.
But Fermento is a little easier to find.
So that's
But
yeah, and that's what I was gonna ask you next was just a little bit about your winemaking. I mean, since we got up to Veraison and you're letting the vineyard go, let's assume that harvest happens and you're making the wine. So we'll take a break from what's happening in the vineyard and ask about
yeah,
winemaking. I was surprised. Uh, I mean, at first surprised until I listened to your explanation when I heard in another interview that you did that you add yeast, and I was like, I always
yeah.
think
Well,
when
that's
you're
an old one though.
yeah, no, and it's like I guess I just wanted to talk about it because I what you say about it makes so much sense, which is essentially you want to express the farming. And if you, especially like you and me and a lot of other people, when you're getting started, you're working in shared facilities for your winemaking.
Mm-hmm.
Your cellar is like, you might be in a custom crush or you might be sharing space with somebody else. You have no control over what they're adding. And so if you just let a wild ferment happen, it's going to be whatever the microbes are in that in that cellar. That it's not necessarily respecting or reflecting the grapes and the vineyard and the farming. Um, and so your solution to that was just use a yeast that's a doesn't impart a lot of flavor or aromas, so it just allows allows a clean ferment, a consistent ferment for all of your wines, and
Hmm.
therefore what you're comparing isn't the randomness of some cellar microbes, but the consistency of the yeast from bottle to bottle. So I thought that was such a smart explanation, a whole different way of thinking about it, because everything I've always heard and thought about was like, low intervention, you want to express the vineyard, you want to not mess with the grapes, just let them ferment. But then the reality is, when we do analysis, we know that it's if somebody brought some yeast into the cellar 5 years ago, that's probably what's fermenting your grapes. It's like it's not necessarily what came from the vineyard. But what else? I mean, talk more about your winemaking. I'd love to know more
Okay.
about.
So in 2000, so that interview I think was like, I'm guessing that's the Grape Collective interview. That
Okay, I can't remember
and
either. I should have written it down, but
yeah, I remember like when they talked about that. But so I'm guessing, but in 2017, we finally bought our own facility.
I was going to ask. So has that changed that perspective
Yeah,
on
so we haven't.
yeast?
So in our new facility, we're not inoculating because we don't have to issue our neighbors' yeast getting into our wine and not wanting that our neighbors like high impact yeast in our wine.
Right. Are
So
you
so that took
now
that off the table.
dogmatic? Are you now being, again, because I've come from German background, I can say this. Are you being German about letting yeast come into the cellar? Like, are you being very protective of the the environment so that you
Not
are
really.
just
Like in
letting the
terms of like no
okay,
barrels from outside can enter the cellar or that kind of thing.
right, right.
No, because again, I'm not a luckily the other half of my background is Icelandic, and so they still believe in elves, and so it's like so it's not this idea of purity doesn't really. I'm not really like um, driven
Into
by
that.
this idea of purity, and so it's like okay, if a little bit of outside yeast gets in there, so what? That's not it's that's life, So we're the main thing is we're it's this craftsmanship, and so what so like we try to just do a good job basically. It's and so
Right.
it's like I'm not equating purity with craftsmanship. There's I think that
I
there's
I love
they're
that.
different, and so
I love that.
so
Yeah.
yeah we try to do a good job in our winery, and if a little bit of we're in Napa Valley. I mean, there's 700. God only knows wineries here. God only knows how much commercial yeast is just in the air, right?
Right.
But we've
Breathing
been
it in.
working. We've actually done some studies with what yeast are fermenting our wines, and it's our new winery that is uninoculated, and it's definitely a mix of
Okay.
wild strains and some commercial strains that are just feral or out and about. And so,
Yeah.
but it's just the reason that we're not inoculating in the new winery is just honestly just because um, I'm geeking out on the process of it and just wanting it adds another. It's more challenging. It feels more real. It feels more true to the vineyard. More true to our place. And
Yeah.
and so that's kind of the motivation. It's but it's I don't know if I like the results better or worse, but I'm just enjoying that it's like another level of the craftsmanship that we finally have the control of our own place, and so it's natural that then we let our own yeast do the work in our own place.
So you I mean, it sounds like you're pretty dogmatic about the kind of farming that you want, but not as dogmatic about the winemaking.
Well,
The
okay,
wine.
and that I'm just as dogmatic. I mean, if you're looking at it that way, when we talk about like attention to detail, craftsmanship, like trying to understand and pay attention to every single facet of the process, I'm
It's
equally dogmatic on the winery and the vineyard.
got
But
it.
again, in the vineyard, I'm extremely controlling with the horticultural aspects of the grape growing, like, tipping the shoots and getting them up in the wires. But I'm extremely allowing of nature within the vineyard. And, because, like we have all kind of habitat plants, native plants, hedgerows, there's tons of stuff living in there.
Right.
I'm not trying to
Right.
like control how many quail are living in the bushes around the vineyard. We're just, the riot of life that's there's a lot of joy there, and that's something that we're just trying to get out of the way and repair this place so that it can kind of spring into its own identity. And so that's totally different than like the vine itself that we're trying to like guide in its annual growth.
That's what I meant by dogmatic was more about the approach, not
Mm-hmm.
controlling everything, but that you're not using conventional chemicals and things like that. Like the
Yeah,
approach is to let the riot of life happen, to to pay attention, to be careful, to be thoughtful and smart, and but also to be organic,
yeah.
to be yeah.
And so in the
Um,
winery, we're dogmatically organic also. So
are you going to get it certified so that you can
no, because
say like,
the problem is that American organic standards, you're not allowed to use SO2.
oh
All
yeah,
all the other organic standards in the rest of the world, you can use SO2. And so we're probably going to start labeling our wines made with organic grapes because that allows you to use the same level of SO2 as the EU allows, basically.
right,
And so and that seems, that's more, because I don't have a problem with a small amount of SO2, just like I don't have a problem with using some sulfur in the vineyard. We
right.
don't use very much SO2, just like we don't use very much sulfur in the vineyard. But to me, SO2 is traditional and it's not carcinogenic.
Right.
It's just a
And
simple little time-honored winemaking adjunct. And
and
so,
yeah, and it
um,
seems like without it, you end up with potentially s- not delicious wine.
yeah, that's like, like a different. I mean, it can be really good or it can be really bad, but
Right.
I'm not going to go to all this work to then just like
Roll the
wonder,
dice.
and just like in the vineyards, like, we're hands on with our organic farming. We're not doing the Fukuoka, just let it totally go.
Right.
I mean,
Right. Right.
again, I'm trying to grow our vineyards so that there's tons of nature in there that can live in there happily. But the
Yeah.
vines themselves, we're very focused on growing good grapes, and the same thing in the winery. We're very focused on making good wine. So like so in the winery, it's the same kind of thing. You control what you can control with craftsmanship. So this wine's aging faster. We're going to bottle it earlier. Wine's aging slower. We're going to bottle it later. This wine, this wine is more lighter aromatic wine. It goes into a bigger, thicker staved barrel. This is a more highly tannic, tight wine. It goes into a thinner staved barrel. Like we're going to rack this one because it needs air. We're not going to rack that one because we don't want it to fall apart and get tired. You know,
Right.
it's just the craft of winemaking.
Yeah.
So that our wines are incredibly consistent, and that's not because of a bunch of additives. It's because we paid a lot of attention to every single wine as it's fermenting and aging, just like we were paying attention out in the vineyards. And
And
so that's
to
so in terms of dogmatic, it's like again dogmatic about the craftsmanship. Our trip is
yeah.
not just letting it go. Like there's some wines that we drink that we love to drink, my wife and I, that are made by people that their trip is letting it go. And
Yeah.
I have it. So I'm not going to. I don't, definitely am a fan of natural wine, and
Yeah.
our wine is pretty much on that continuum, except that that's not our personal trip. I just it's just that there's a lot of pride around that what the
Yeah.
what the wines are well crafted, and so they may be less exciting for somebody that really geeks out on like a microbial journey for the wine, but that's not our journey.
Right. So to wrap up the year, I'm guessing the fall is if you're adding any compost or anything, if you feel like there's a need for it, and otherwise you're just letting things go to bed and go dormant and waiting.
Yeah,
Are you doing any late
seeding
season
our in the
spray?
seeding our cover crop where it
Okay.
needs to, where a cover crop needs to get filled in more. Um, Repairing, the trellises in the fall after harvest. We putting the
Yeah.
compost on all of everywhere that needs compost, young vines, wheat vines, winterizing, preparing for erosion. Because we get all that rain in the winters, and we want to have clean water, and we'd rather have no water run off our properties, have it all infiltrate into the
Yeah.
ground. One of the things I really love is taking a property that had huge puddles every time it rained, and after you care for the soil with good cover cropping, the you don't get puddles anymore, right? It all
Right.
the rain just soaks in like it's supposed
Yeah.
to, and so. But you do have on some of the hillsides and stuff. We need to put straw out and put some little barriers and things like that to prevent any erosion. So that's kind of like the rhythm in the fall.
Yeah.
And
I
we kind of
noticed that
skipped over
this
the
year.
middle part. Like after we get our shoots
Oh,
up and we get our, and everything, we do have to
oh yeah.
pull some laterals in the shady areas.
Oh yeah. Okay.
But the laterals or leaves, but I don't like direct sunlight on the fruit, and so, but we don't want it deep shade in the vine either. So we kind of reach inside and just cut a few things out, just enough to so that you have some filtered light and
Yeah.
airflow, but no direct sun. That's all done by hand, and then we do our fruit thinning, which is basically done. We don't pay attention to yields per acre. It's everything's on a per vine basis, just like the pruning, like everything else. And so we go through and basically assess every shoot. They just go down the line and say, oh, it's a skinny little shoot. They cut the fruit off. It's a medium shoot. Take it down to one cluster. It's a nice strong shoot. Leave both clusters on it,
Nice.
and we can
Okay.
go through all of the properties like that. So in some, if it's a weaker vineyard, we put half the fruit on the ground or more. If it's a strong vineyard, we're barely cutting anything. And
Right.
then so we have huge variations in our yields from vineyard to vineyard. Then, which
So
is good because it's all based on the vine.
right. Very
Like our two
personalized
Chardonnay
approach.
vineyards, like Michael Mara vineyard is 2 tons per acre, and Linda Vista vineyard is 8 tons per acre.
Wow.
Yeah,
Huh.
big variations based on vigor.
And the
Um,
quality is equal.
yeah, I mean Michael Mara is this pretty amazing vineyard, but man, yeah, it does not produce because it's so rocky.
Right.
And so,
And and at
and
eight
then
tons, you're getting. I mean, it seems like it flies in the face of conventional thought
yeah,
about
the
low
low yield
yields.
equals high quality is a complete and utter myth. It's been disproven so many times, and
Yeah.
it just persists in our industry, and it's totally unsustainable to be thinning your crop below what the vine balance is. It's totally wasteful of the land
Right.
use, of the tractor passes, of everything.
Right.
It's a ridiculous myth that really needs to be dispelled. Like it's part of like this weird thing in our culture. Like you have to achieve greatness through suffering, and so I sacrificed more of my fruit for wine quality. And it's like we got to get rid of this idea of like sacrifice and get to balance. It's about balance.
I love that.
And
It sounds
so
like a Cinderella approach to wine growing. That sort of like not too much, not too little, just right, kind of.
that's exactly it. Yep.
Is that Cinderella? No, that's
I'm not
Goldilocks.
sure.
Sorry, wrong myth. It's
Goldilocks.
Goldilocks.
Yeah, Goldilocks. That's exactly it. Is the Goldilocks principle.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, trying to think of they call it the Goldilocks principle. Well, that's it. And it's all about balance. And and the yields follow the balance.
Oh,
But
there's
and
actually
then
a term called the Goldilocks principle.
I've heard that. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. I thought I was making that up. Oh well, I probably heard it
But hey,
somewhere.
great minds think alike. And then we can't forget harvest, because harvest is there's a lot more to it than just picking the grapes from the vineyard side. Because
Okay.
we most people pick on piece rate, so meaning that they pay the people that are doing the picking by how much they pick. So they just pick as fast as they can. We do everything by I pick hourly, so all of our employees get $10 an hour more during harvest, just
Right.
because, so they're rewarded because other people are doing piece rate, making a bunch of money. and
Right.
um, and then and then it's like, okay, guys, we're going to pick the Dead Fred vineyard today, because I think about a third of the vines are ready in the Dead Fred vineyard. And so we meet out there, and you see see this little section is rocky. You see how the leaves have turned yellow in the fruit zone. See over here, the little bit further down on the hill, you see how all the leaves are still bright green. We're not going to pick those today. And so everyone goes, and we go through the whole place and just pick all the vines that look like they're ready, because they're pale green leaves with top and yellow in the fruit zone, and they're on the rockier area. And that's our harvest for today. And then we'll come back and pick more when it's ready. So my job is running around trying to figure out when the stuff's ready, and be like, okay,
Wow.
we're ready to tackle Dead Fred again. This batch of vines is ready now, and we go after that. And so we could pick our Cabernet vineyards a lot of times 5 different harvests, kind of like
Oh,
picking
wow.
Sauternes or something, where they're just going through over and over again. And that's how we do
Right.
our cab. And so that way, that's another part of getting like ripeness at lower sugar levels, because those vines are totally ripe, and we're not waiting for the other part of the vineyard to get ripe, and then meanwhile our sugar's been going up day by day.
And how are you making that pick decision, other than just what you described, the sort of appearance of
And
ripeness
well,
and
the
the
flavor of the
appearance of,
grapes, but the appearance generally keys me in. And then because generally the appearance correlates with what we're looking for flavor wise. And then it's I can like, we have our employees are all been with us for quite some time, and so it's like so we're kind of on the same page with like when it's getting ripe, and and we can taste some grapes together, and when we can kind of look at the vines. I've been working with these vines all year. They know the vines, and so it's like, okay, guys, this one is ripe. Everyone's like, yeah, okay, I see. They know exactly what I'm talking about, but for me, it's flavor. And when I say flavor, I literally mean flavor, because most winemakers will
right.
talk about the tannins, and they're very focused on tannins, and I'm not. I'm focused on flavors, because to me that's everything. Tannins we can work with in the winery. If it's the tannins are a little harsh, we can press a little earlier, or do different punch downs or delesages, or different temperature regimes, and in rackings. I mean, we have a lot of ability with traditional winemaking techniques to work with the tannins that were given within the grapes. Which generally, though, if the vineyard was balanced, the tannins are going to be great for the most part. But anyways, we still have the ability to work with our tannins to a certain degree. But flavors are everything. That's the only thing. You can't do anything about that. The plant just gave you the flavors, and then your winemaking, you're trying to protect and
Right.
preserve them.
Right.
And
So
so that's what I
you're
pay
not,
attention to.
uh, are you doing any analysis of pH and bricks?
I look at bricks to make as a reality check, to make sure that I'm not like making a huge mistake. But
Right.
I don't look at pH or TA, because it's too many variables. It's not actionable. I just I got to go in flavor and make sure that I'm not making a huge mistake with bricks.
Got it.
It's too overwhelming
Okay.
to look at other factors. It's like then you're going to get yourself into a like tizzy, and it's just like I need harvest is really intense. You're making really big
Yeah.
decisions, and I try a lot of it is what I've learned over the years of how I can keep a clear head and make good decisions.
Right. Cool.
Because
Anything
we're
else we
dealing with
missed?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we talked a lot about viticulture, probably more than organic farming, but I think we covered a lot of organic farming as well.
Yeah, I mean the way that
Yeah,
you approach it is organic, from an organic approach. So it definitely laid that groundwork. But it's it's yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for that. That's
yeah.
learning from the master. You know, I don't know if maybe just to end on this, is there anything, because I really appreciate your time and spelling all this out, but is there anything new that you've learned recently about uh, organic viticulture, or just whether it's soil microbiology or anything at all that is blowing your mind that you're super excited about?
Um, I mean, I'm more and more and more just fascinated with the microbiome. Um, I mean, I think that's, I mean, just so interesting, and the plant, and how that ties in with the plant immune system. Um, the, so vineyard wise, that's like I think a lot about, and I think a lot about the. I mean, the plant physiology, and I just really think a lot about that, the hormones and how they interact with the environment and how the plants communicate with each other. Via vapors, all kind of interesting things. I just really geek out on like that process between the microbiome and talking to the plants, and the plants talking to the microbiome and then talking to each other. Because the dream is for the vineyard system to just be completely self-sustaining.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and the winery side is like the area that I need to learn more is in the microbiology. Because the biggest headaches I've had over the years as a winemaker have been when like certain bacteria give me grief and cause lots of VA or stick to fermentation or
Right.
what are the different like there's like we got a major problem with these with what I'm just describing. And we hired someone who just retired from she was a Linda Besson, who's a yeast expert. Her like right hand at UC Davis is like a walking encyclopedia of yeast.
Oh wow.
She's retired now and consulting. We hire her and describe the situation. And she's like, "Oh, Lactobacillus malayi. It comes from the you see it in wineries that have apple trees planted next to them." And I'm like, "Holy crap! We have these apple trees right around our winery." Um,
uh,
we cut them down, which I hated to do because I love them. But then it solved our problem, and it really
wow.
was like, okay, I am seriously ignorant on so like
Wow. Yeah, that's
you,
amazing.
you make yeah. So there's a lot to learn there. So that's an area that I really want to learn more about. To help with our we use even less SO2, for example, or like it's just like organic farming. Like I realize there's a lot to learn about the microbial ecology within the winery.
Right.
And so
Love
that's
that.
kind of like an area that I want to start trying to understand better. I've been reading books about cheese because there's been a lot of work on like microbial ecology of cheese caves.
Ooh, that
So
is nice. That sounds like a fun
yeah,
hobby to get into, a delicious hobby to take on. Um,
it's endless. It's so
yeah.
fun being in this world.
Uh, man. Well, there's so many things we didn't get into and so many things we could get into, but I really respect the time that you have given already. This has been, I think, just for anybody, any young person or anybody who's thinking about going organic or anybody who's thinking about doing their own farming, invaluable stuff.
Awesome.
And
Thank you.
and to the reason you're so good at this, I think people need to check you out. If they don't know you, I'm definitely going to intro you at the top of this so that people know who you are. But check out Matthiasson.com, Matthiasson.com. Any is that the best way for people to get in touch or find out more
Yeah.
about you? That's it.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Probably. Yeah. Uh-huh. There's a lot of
Awesome.
stuff. There's Song TV has some stuff they've done on us, and and there's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah. Uh,
And
I
because I enjoy talking about it. Anytime anyone says, "Hey, you want to talk about organic farming?" Yes, we got to keep the dialogue going and get it and grow it.
excellent.
It's a passion.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that. I mean, it makes sense to me. Wine being, I hate to call it a luxury product because I sort of think of it as a necessity in my life, but it seems like something that we could definitely go 100% organic on. Like we could afford to do that.
We can afford to do that, right?
Yeah,
Exactly. Another person you might want to think about interviewing is Mimi Castile up in Oregon.
I did actually. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
awesome. Okay.
yeah. Oh, Mimi's fantastic. Yeah, no, she did. Yeah, and
Yeah,
gracious as you. The two of you are fantastic and huge
she's
proponent.
really
She's the
passionate as well. And she like made the statement that like wine isn't important enough to destroy the world with, but
yeah,
the economic
right.
so how can we use the economics of wine to like repair land? And I thought that was a really good way of framing it.
Yes, that's exactly what. Yeah, I'm trying to do. I mean, this is wine is the gateway to talk about these things and to bring attention to them, and it certainly should be the first on the spearhead of transitioning all agriculture to a more sustainable, more organic approach.
Yeah.
Um, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Steve. I really, really appreciate it. And
Yeah.
yeah, I can't wait to do an intro for you so people know what you can check out. You're making some really interesting wines, unique for Napa Valley, and we'll talk about all that in the intro.
Perfect.
But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Take care. Good luck with your